Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Finding Data Friends. Thanks for joining us again. We have found a new data friend to bring onto the podcast. Bob, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Bob Pusateri. I'm based out of Chicago. I've been working with the data community now for probably a while, maybe like 13, 14 years, I guess. Um, Organizer of the SQL Saturday event in Chicago before that pandemic thing happened and kind of put a monkey wrench into the works. And I love being part of the community, speaking at events, and getting to meet new people.
Awesome.
Which is why we all met at Data Grillin about a month ago, which was fun. I mean, I may be slightly biased, but
Yeah, it was a good time, as always.
Always a good time. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, we'll get straight into it. One of the first questions that we always ask our guests is what their favorite data thing is.
Oh, I got to go probably with my first love, and that would be storage engine internals for Azure SQL and SQL Server. I've been curious about those since the very beginning, so I love learning more and presenting about them and writing blog posts and whatnot. That's always been something that fascinates me, even though it's not always as interesting as the new hotness that is coming out at the time. But fundamentals are important.
I mean, you are wearing an AKB T-shirt, so
I
I'm going
am.
to say
My favorite nerdy internals conference had to get
it
some
is
love
very
for them.
much on brand.
Yeah, there we go.
That is on brand. We always appreciate when someone comes on and has like a fundamentals or like something we know about, and maybe we don't know a lot about internals, but as far as SQL Server and storage and stuff, it's nice to have.
And someone is using
fundamentals
words that we've heard before.
Exactly. Exactly.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So what is it that makes you excited about storage fundamentals?
I was always curious, even when I was a kid and I was using god awful tools like Microsoft Works. Like, you remember that one? That was
I do.
back in the day. Yeah, it was like the cheaper version of Office distributed with like Windows 3.1. But I was always fascinated of how like the stuff I typed or did on the computer ended up in a file. That was always a big curiosity of mine. So I remember playing with that and opening up hex editors and trying to see if I could figure out how the data was written. And then I started doing the same thing with like Microsoft Access, and then I eventually figured out there was this SQL Server thing, which I couldn't afford at that point. But starting in like 2000, there was MSDE, which was like an embedded version of SQL Server that was built into Windows, severely limited. I think you had like a 2 GB database limit, but that was a lot of data back then. So you could do that, and then eventually, in 2005 they came out with Developer Edition, which cost money at that point, but it was still way cheaper, so I could afford to play a little better, and I was working at that point too.
Very cool.
Nerd. What? Who said that?
There we go.
So how does that translate into the new modern world where everybody's only moving to the cloud and not doing anything else anymore?
Yeah, well, fortunately, if you like storage engine fundamentals like I do, they're the same, right? I mean, it's the same product in the cloud. There's obviously different layers and some more complexity to it, but the way those parts work, the way the lock manager works, the way isolation levels work, the way rows and column stores and compression and everything, that's all the same. So that didn't lose any utility there, thankfully. In fact, I think it's even more important now because when you're in the cloud, you really need to understand this stuff, even though a lot of people seem to think you don't. I'd argue it's probably more important.
So what you're saying is we're still going to need DBAs in the cloud? How weird is that?
Well, a little bit. Those skills, right? I mean,
I think he's just making it up, Jess. But there is no way this is true.
I like
marketing
to hear that
material is very specific.
I want to be kept around.
I would appreciate being useful for another decade or two. That'd be nice.
So there is a retirement date in your mind.
Eventually, I mean, I'm American, so I think I'm supposed to never retire, but I'd like to. It's a goal at least.
No, which is why I was given that I know how old you are. A decade sounds rather soon. Just
optimistic, yeah. Hopefully more than a decade.
I'm not saying that you don't deserve it to retire in a decade, but there we go.
All I need is one winning lottery ticket. We'll be good.
Are you
Exactly.
even playing the lottery?
Every once in a while.
That's more than
Has to.
me, and I still hope.
You're smart, but has to get up to an amount I'm actually willing to buy a ticket for. Like those measly $20 million prizes. That's not worth
Yeah,
my time.
that's not gonna do
No,
anything for us.
Yeah, no,
So
20 million. That's not going to cut it. I mean, what am I going
yeah,
to do with 20 million? That's not even a yacht. So I hear you.
Oh dear.
I mean, think of all the SQL Server 2005 developer editions you could buy with $20 million.
oh man,
I
there'd be
think it was
none
like
left on
79
eBay.
bucks or so. So
I feel like it was. Yeah, it was under 100, I think.
yeah,
But
it might have been 79 euros or something, but it was definitely it was something that just not everybody in their cat starts downloading and using it for free, and potentially cause support tickets and stuff. And at the same time, it was super super cheap. So yeah, it was
yeah,
definitely
and
in
it
the
was in that
lottery.
fancy clamshell case that like folded open too. Is the one I had. I remember.
Yeah, that was in times where we could not just download everything yet.
Yeah,
I mean, 2005, things got better, but still. So let's see if uh, how do I put this? I have a certain expectation to the answer to our next question.
oh dear.
Let's see if I
Ben
win
likes to try and
if
guess.
I win the lottery.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you're not playing with storage internals and all that, Bob, what is your favorite non-data thing? What gets you excited?
Should I give you an answer you
What
weren't
what gets you
expecting?
all steamed up?
Oh boy. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, we can talk about
Hopefully,
trains. That'd probably be. I'd be lying if I wasn't saying I love trains. So yeah, good times.
Without my kind of forced segue into this, would trains still have been your answer, or would you have gone?
Probably. Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair at this
What do you
point.
mean probably? I mean, you would have made the decision like 7 seconds ago.
Well, I mean, we're in the middle of tornado season right now, so I could talk about weather too. But I think I'd be having a missed opportunity if I didn't get to tell the world how much I love trains.
Oh, there's
Bob, I
also
feel like
that.
you might be the ultimate nerd, like the crossover between trains, weather, and storage internals has just like
There we go.
caused everyone to be like, "Wow."
Not to forget about all the random Bob facts.
True, true.
That is true as well.
So, why trains, and what is your super favorite train fact that we all need to learn and know?
Super favorite train fact. Oh boy, we can get nerdy on that too. So
I
I
was
don't know
expecting that.
why. I don't know why trains. I will tell you that I always enjoyed. There was an ice cream shop in my town right by the train tracks when I was a kid. So going and getting ice cream and watching trains go by is like hard coded into my persona. Um, there was a TV show, and it was actually from the UK. I want to say it was on like BBC Four, and it was called Steam Days, I believe. But they had it in the US as well, except they renamed it. They called it Great Steam Trains, and it was basically presented by the UK National Railway Museum. And there was like 6 episodes, and they followed a different train every time. And I had a tape of these recorded on Betamax because that's what we had when I was a kid. And the first episode was about a particular locomotive in the UK called the Duchess of Hamilton. It was LMS number 46229. And this engine it's in the UK National Train Museum. So if I ever get to York, I will totally go there and see it and try to touch it and probably get kicked out. But like, yeah, it was really cool. So if I ever
Maybe
get
we shouldn't have
escorted out of
recorded
there,
that.
you'll know why.
Hey, Sequel Bits
Um,
Train
organizers,
touching.
if you're watching,
oh,
bring it to York, have
yeah.
the party at that museum,
Oh boy,
and have the nerd touch the
yeah.
train.
The
Bob
That
rest
that,
is
can die
that
history.
sounds
happy
so
after
wrong,
that.
but
Yeah, there we go. But yeah, so it's there. So one of these days I'll get there and actually see it. Um, and what else? You
only
want you
looking,
want
Bob, no touching.
you wanted a nerdy train fact? So I'll give you a good steam engine fact that most people don't think of. How do you get water into a boiler of a steam engine? Remember, it's under pressure, so you have to force water into a boiler that's under pressure. And people will be like, well, you could do some kind of high pressure pump, and you could, but that's actually not very efficient. So the way you do it is you blow the water in with steam. And this can present a different problem because you have a boiler at, let's say, 200 psi or whatever. That's as much pressure as you have. How do you use 200 psi to blow water into a vessel that also has 200 psi. The physics doesn't sound like it'll make sense, right? You'd have a system at equilibrium and nothing would move.
That was the first thing that popped into our heads.
me
Like, how are
too.
you going to? I mean,
Oh, that's the same.
Totally right, right?
This will never work.
Yeah. So they invented what was called a water injector, and basically it has a whole bunch of different converging and diverging nozzles, but basically you can use steam to create a Venturi effect and suck water up a pipe. That'll, of course, create an area of low pressure. It'll go through another converging nozzle, and the pressure will be raised, and then it can enter a second nozzle and go into the boiler. And normally this wouldn't work because, again, the system's at equilibrium, but the fact is the water's moving, and the water has momentum. So it'll keep moving even though the pressure is equal at that point.
I thought that's what they're doing.
Yeah,
I figured you were thinking of that. So
the word I got from that sentence was nozzle.
Nozzle.
I was going to say, Jess, remember how like less than 10 minutes ago we were like, thank you for mentioning something where we at least know the words, and now this.
There we go, yeah.
I will say we learned something today, but I'm not sure exactly what I've learned.
It'll yeah.
Let me put it this way. I do not feel in a comfortable position of reteaching what I just learned to somebody else.
There we go. But yes, so if you ever wondered how you add water to a boiler, very important. And then, of course, you'd have certain trains like the Flying Scotsman where they needed lots of water. You know, water's the limiting factor of a steam locomotive. You can carry enough
when
coal.
You're flying, I mean, come on.
Well, that too, but you can carry tons of coal, but you always need more water. So, you know, what they came up with for trains like that was just water troughs that sat between the tracks, and they could lower a little scoop, and the engine moving forward would force water up, and then they could reload the tender with water that way and never have to stop for your important high-speed nonstop trains.
So what I heard in that entire train thingy was something ice cream, something scoop.
There we go.
Yeah, that's it.
Ice cream on the train was very important, I'm sure.
Which is a great segue, Ben, into our final question of the podcast, which is what your favorite food is.
Oh, you know, I could go with steak, and that's always a good option. But I'm actually going to do the side because steaks are great, but I really like a good twice baked potato with my steak. I feel like that's an important part of the meal. If a restaurant has that, I'm like 9,000% guaranteed to order it.
Good to know. So we just need a party at a train museum with twice baked potatoes, and you're there.
There we go. I will be there.
Best day of your life.
More or less.
What goes on that baked potato? Just sour cream or just plain, just butter?
Twice baked potato, you don't really have to put anything on because everything's in it already. So you bake a potato and you scoop the insides out, more or less. You leave the shell of the potato and a little bit of the inside. And then you add, sour cream, butter, salt, bacon
Would you
bits,
inject it at high PSI?
No, you don't inject it. You mix this all up separately, and then you put it back in the potato shell, and you bake it again. So, I mean, you could put more on it at that point, and a lot of them will have, they'll be topped with cheese or something like that before they throw it in the oven. But otherwise, it has, everything you'd want already in it.
Tidy.
Yeah.
That sounds perfect for the RV, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
Because we got to keep that thing clean, because otherwise we need to remove all these stains with high pressure, and then you have pressure working against pressure again.
And the
having that
equilibrium.
200 psi double-baked potato working against the boiler with the nozzles and the scoops of ice cream next to the train we cannot touch.
Absolute chaos.
It's like, I don't even want to know how YouTube is going to generate subtitles for that, because what their AI is trying to do is kind of find a common theme and all. This is not happening, YouTube. This is not happening.
SEO is not going to be very good on this episode, is it?
Most probably not. The thing is, we could manually add subtitles or closed captions to it, but that would require us to actually understand what was happening. So it isn't happening. I'm sorry.
No
it is what it is. Now, I don't think I've ever had a twice-baked potato.
Really? Oh, okay. Yeah, you should definitely. If you're ever somewhere that has one, I'd say it's worth your time.
Because, I mean, I've had baked potato. I've even had kumpir, which is something very popular in Turkey, which is basically a baked potato with toppings. But they have all these food stalls and all that, where it's just a regular street food where you get that baked potato, I want this and this and this and this on top of it. So it's more like a kind of like a Subway for baked potatoes, I'm going to say.
Oh, okay.
Sounds good.
Which is really, really nice. but
You ever
I don't
had
think I've
a
ever
big
had
sweet
the one
potato?
where you need the nozzle for the extra steam thingy. I'm confused.
Never have we said nozzle so many times in one episode. New
Wow, there we
record.
go. That's the
Again,
keyword of the episode
if
here.
this would be a Friends episode, it would be titled "The One with the Nozzles."
Perfect.
Nice.
And with that, Mr. Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure learning so much more about nozzles and steam and all that.
Hmm.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And we see you all again next week with a brand new friend. Bye.
Bye, folks.
See ya.